To the cloud, yes. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be here for the second to last office hours for the Urban Agriculture Grant Program. There is an opportunity, if I've been offering this at each session, if anybody wants me to dedicate 12 minutes or so to go over a slide deck that covers the basics of the grant, I'm always offering to do that. However, there is a pre-recorded video of that exact same presentation, and we only have an hour here. So if you guys want, if anybody wants me to take out 12 or 15 minutes from the Q&A section to cover the slides, that is an option. Alternatively, I also really encourage you to watch the exact same presentation that is recorded and available on our website. So if anybody really needs an overview and wants me to dedicate the first 10 to 15 minutes of this hour to that, could you go like this, or maybe give me another reaction emoji thingy so that I know? So, okay, so Marianne, you do want me to go over all of these slides? No, that's a no. Okay, so no. Okay, great. Okay, so then with that, I will just go ahead and we'll just dive in. So I'll just call people in order and I will do my best to answer your questions. One caveat is I cannot really give you any advice on directly on your proposal, like advice on your project, but I can answer questions, technical questions around anything that you might have regarding the application. So let's go ahead and get started. Sierra, you are the first person in line with your hand up. And I'm not sure if you're speaking, but you are on mute.
Okay. Thank you. I needed permission to unmute for some reason. Okay, I am the one who put the question in the chat. Can you guarantee that this opportunity will be available next year? Because it's one time we might wait.
Yeah, I mean, so this is what's happening right now. The state has presented this. They hired, even my own job is like, it's a 1 year opportunity. It's being offered 1 year. Of course, so there's no guarantee that it will be offered again. All I can say is there's an opportunity, for me to advocate and say, there's a huge need for this and blah, blah, blah. So who knows what will happen, but right now, the definitive answer is that it is being presented by the California Department of Food and Ag as a one-time opportunity. So, yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay, I'll guess that Sierra put her hand down, so that must have been it. So, okay, great. So Mallory?
Hi, yes. So I was just going over the FAQ sheet and I noticed something that I had not noticed before. Everywhere else, I saw that small businesses are qualified. And then in the FAQ, I noticed a line under the track 2 eligibility that says nonprofit and for-profit organizations that fall under the definition of qualified small business resource conservation districts are eligible to apply. Does that mean it's only so small businesses are eligible even if they are not? Okay, good.
Yeah. Small businesses are absolutely an eligible entity. The only thing is that you have to meet the definition of a qualified small business, which
Great,
just
thank you.
Yeah. Okay, you're welcome. You're welcome. Great.
I can't even believe how much that panicked me, and luckily
I'm so sorry.
This started. It's okay. It's okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, thanks for the question. Sam, you're up next.
You guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much
Sam.
for helping us and assisting us with this process, first of all. The second part that I'm very curious about is the letter of support. On the top, it says, on the template, it says, it says grantor's address. Or is it supposed to be the CD? Is it supposed to be my address or your address or whose address?
That's so confusing. I know. If I'm gonna just be completely honest, it doesn't really matter. But,
okay, perfect.
Yeah, you can use CDFA's address or the applicant's address. That's a kind of an inconsequential thing that doesn't make any difference. But the word grantor does mean CDFA in case.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm sorry about that confusion. I also was had to Google that.
Okay, no, perfect. I think that's it. My proposal is almost ready. Just
Great.
this part. Great.
Okay,
Thank you so
awesome.
much.
You're welcome, Sam. Okay. Next question is Mishwa and Roni. I'm sorry if I mispronounced. Is it Ronnie?
It's Ronnie. It's fine.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah, and hello, everybody. I have a couple of questions. When we were checking eligibility, we're a HUD housing community,
Mhm.
and we're low income, and then and we also qualify as disadvantaged. Does that makes us eligible, right?
Yeah, so essentially your project either needs to be led by or serve
Yes.
a community that's
Oh.
in the priority population. So if you just put your address into, there's a link to a map that's called the priority populations map. If you just put your address into that map, you'll see that there are all these different layers.
Right.
And so all of the first 4 layers on that map are qualified areas. The only layer on that map that does not qualify says low income household eligible, which I contacted the map creators, and that's every single square inch of the entire state of California.
Yeah.
So, so I was like, oh, that's a non-layer layer. So all of the other 4 layers, just use that map and put your address in. And as long as your project is either located or serves a community in that area, then you're good to go.
What was confusing is that there were the same number for low income and the same number for disadvantage, and so and there are 3 slots. So anyway, we filled it out.
Oh yeah, those are that's just a place for you to put your census tract
Right.
information that you get from the map. Yeah, and if you're applying for track 2, you only need to use 1, but you can offer up to 3 if you're, offering services throughout a wider area.
Okay, and oh yeah, as we're working on the actual grant, and if we work on a section and we click completed, can we go back and edit that section?
Yes, the Amplifund it won't submit anything until you hit submit application. So you can close it and work on it as many times. Just make sure to hit save. Yes.
Great, thank
yes,
you.
make sure to hit save. So yeah.
That's it.
Okay, great.
Can I ask one more question? So
Sure.
if a project obtains money from HSA, is that okay?
If the project has funding from the only restriction is that you can't have 2 funding sources funding the exact same thing.
Okay, that's
So
great.
no, I guess people say double dipping or whatever.
Right.
But a project can be supported by multiple funding sources to make it work.
Okay.
So yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. I think because there were so many questions about the school district that I started to worry about that. So, okay.
Oh no, you're fine. As long as it's not the exact same activity being funded, you're good to go.
Okay, great.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. Okay, the next person I see is Morgan. Sorry, Morgan.
No worries. It just unmuted. Thank you. And again, yes, thank you for your time for doing this. I believe I was emailing you or somebody in your department for the past couple of days. So I have some questions about when using fiscal agents. So the first question, so it's just a few questions. So the first one is, are there banking requirements for the fiscal agent? Are there any specific banking requirements for them?
So the fiscal agent just needs to be the same. It has to be one of the eligible entities to apply. So when you look at the eligibility and it says, it has to meet the definition of a qualified small business. It has to be a nonprofit or an RCD or so as long as it's a qualifying applicant, you're good to go. Okay,
so no specific banking requirements.
No.
And all funds are dispersed to the fiscal agent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So the funds would be dispersed and then you would do whatever you guys do to make that relationship work.
I know that I read something about a 10% that'll be dispersed at the very end of the project after verifying. So prior to then, will they have to do draws, like monthly draws or something like that? Or
So the way the payments work, so all CDFA grants by nature are reimbursement grants. So you would essentially do your service and then submit your invoicing for whatever you've just accomplished. However, I also very much realize that a lot of our projects don't have upfront cash to accomplish the grant objective. So there is the opportunity to submit an advance payment request, which is just like a one-page form. And it says
Okay.
like, for what reason do you need an advance payment? And your reason could be anything, which is, you know, like, we don't have the money in the bank to do this without the advance payment. So you would fill out an advance payment form. And then once you submit that, for advance payments, you can request up to 3 months worth of your expenses in one advance payment request. So let's
Okay.
say, yeah, and then you won't be able to submit another advance payment request until you spend that all the way down. So you can't
Okay.
have an extra $2,000 and then submit another advance payment request. You'll have to spend it all down and then submit your next advance payment request. And it takes
Okay.
about 45 days from when you submit your advance payment request for that to be processed through the administration's office and for you to actually get access to that funding.
Okay. All right. And then what is required? Well, you know, I think I asked you to do this in the email. Are there any requirements for financial audits?
I'm not really sure exactly like the details of that question. In terms of,
I know like sometimes some of the larger government grants, like US grants, or excuse me, federal grants, they do require financial audit, like those lengthy financial audits. I don't know if that will be something that takes place with this.
that's not a requirement. I mean, any grant in CDFA might be audited, like you could get audited by the government during your grant, you know, at the end of your grant, but there's no requirement that you have to submit an audit or something like that.
Okay.
Is that answering your question?
Yes, that does answer my question.
Okay.
I think for now that answers all of them.
Okay, great. Thanks, Morgan. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. The next person is Rolando.
All right, can you hear me just fine?
You're good.
Okay, so my first question is, can you apply as a principal for multiple sites if you have multiple farm projects available?
Yeah, a farm project or an applicant can have multiple sites, yes.
But you can't have multiple applications, can you?
No, you're only allowed to submit one application. And the application is linked to the tax ID number that is attached to the applicant. So
Okay.
only, yeah.
And does that tax ID need to be for a business that was working as an urban farm or farm related?
The tax ID should be connected to the project.
Okay, perfect. And then I'm assuming, let's say I, Rolando, or my business, my LLC can apply as, you know, one time per this turn of this grant, but I can apply as a partner or a supporting party of somebody else, like let's say another farmer that may need my help as well.
That's such a, I don't really know what type of services you're providing or
Well,
are you
so
asking?
for example, like let's say my farm, right? I would apply under my tax ID, but my buddy's farm, who might also need my services, I could act as a subcontractor for them, right? If he applies with his tax ID.
Yeah, and so then you would also then provide alternative services on top of that would get paid to you through somebody else's grant application.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. Can you type that up and I'll send it to grants administration? Because if I'm being honest, I don't know for sure if you can get money from 2 applications. That's a really good question. And I'm sorry, I don't want to answer it incorrectly because I think it's a very important question. Would you mind, could you either add that to the chat or send me an email with that and I'll get back to you like as soon as I can?
Yeah, of course. No, I got you.
Okay.
And then when, let's say if we're approved, right? Do you know if that can be used for banking leverage? Because you mentioned, for example, like a lot of people may not have 300,000 or even 60,000, but if you have the say so that, you know, or some form of letter stating you're going to receive X amount of money over X amount of time, if we can, you know, walk to the bank and say, hey, here's X amount of money that I'm promised by such and such agency
Yeah,
for
that's a
credit
tough.
reasons.
I completely understand where you're coming from. You will receive if you're selected to receive an award, you're going to
Mhm.
receive an award letter. That's standard practice, which will say, you know, it'll be like a congratulations, your application has been accepted, blah, blah, blah. That inherently is not a guarantee of funds because you might fail to complete something in the contract.
Mhm.
And then, so long story short, that's generally not something we would ever advise,
Okay.
just because it's not, we're not like a financial institution in that way.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Another thing too is farming and just self-sustenance is a very network-oriented thing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we wanted in our application to do was to request funds for media coverage of other farms, either immediately participating in this program or, you know, just doing their thing. But that's something that's not a farming thing, but does promote farming. So how does that work?
No, that's a great question. So in terms of eligible expenses, I mean, you might want to build a website. You might want to hire technical assistants to make nicer logos so that you have better materials. Like all of that is allowable because it's ultimately helping you. If it's ultimately helping you meet the goal that you're setting in your project,
Mhm.
then that's an eligible expense. The only thing that we are not able to fund is direct fundraising. We can't like host a fundraiser. You can't write in a fundraising activity. However, you can create materials that show the success of your project. You can create materials that help to tell stories. So yes, those types of things are allowable, but not directly as fundraising.
Okay,
It's all
and then
technicalities. Yeah.
and you cannot use those funds to purchase land though, right?
You can use funds for land purchase. The thing is so only up to a maximum of 75% of your budget. So if you ask for 100,000, you can only spend 75,000 of that towards land purchase or lease. And so CDFA has not really developed the full, we're in the process of working with the legal team to develop the full guidance of what this will actually look like. But in terms of including this in your application, you are, yeah, good question, Serial. I wish I knew. We are, yeah. So right now, what I can say for sure is that there's one sentence in our guidance documents that says that land leasing and purchasing is an eligible expense up to 75% of your budget.
Okay, and then the last extension on that, and my closing question would be, I'm assuming that land would need to be in California, and
oh yeah,
is there ever one-on-one sessions, or is it overwhelming and we just have to do it like this in terms of getting questions answered?
Oh, no, we can, I mean, if you have really specific things, I'm available. People have been calling me on the phone or send me an email and we can continue. And then whatever questions I answer in private, I've been documenting them in written form. And that's when you go to our website, you'll see a 65-page Q&A document that I've been tracking. And that's where these types of written email conversations will also then be made available to the public.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, the next person that I see is Lydia.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One is the deadline is September 2026. We can go up until then. Is that correct?
Yes.
So is it the end of September? Because for instance, we're making soils tests.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay. And is the report due when? At the end of September or in October?
Yeah, so you just need to have your funding spent by September 30th of 2026. I don't know exactly when the report's due. I don't think it would be due like the same day.
Okay.
You'll need some time to like sit there and do an evaluation of what just happened. If you don't mind sending me, Lydia, like when our reports due after closing, I can get that information, but I'm not exactly sure when the reports are due. I'm sure that they don't expect you to submit a report on the final day. So yeah, but you have until September 30th of 2026 to spend your funding.
Okay, great. Just a couple more questions.
Sure.
Do you have any requirements or recommendations for the project or aspects of it to be evaluated? You know, like we have an activity, do you want people to do surveys, or, you know, do you have any guidance there?
So in the Amplifund application, there is a question that requires you to speak about what metrics you are collecting to measure the success of your project. So that is where that information is going to come into play. And that is entirely up to what's feasible for you to accomplish. You know, you can also set aside funds if you want to for evaluation, because that might add value to your project at the end of the day. And that takes time and costs money. So that would be an eligible expenses. We want to do an evaluation report on the success of our program. You could do that. But in the Amplifund application directly, you will be describing what metrics you are collecting to document the success of your program.
Okay, if you please, one last question about the contractor role.
Oh, yeah.
If I understood it correctly, up to $5,000, you don't need to bid it out. Is that right? But anything after $5,000,
yes,
it has to be one way or the other, or it wasn't clear to me, or if there was a sentence about if your organization requires it, or I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah, so in the you'll see that there's a link to something called the contractor guidelines document, and that's pretty much out of the rules and regs book from CDFA. But in short, what it says is that if you have to hire a contractor, an outside worker for anything that you need, if it's below $5,000, you don't have to seek out bids to prove that you're getting a good enough deal, essentially. If it's over $5,000, you would need to get 3 bids and to show that you're paying a reasonable price for the work. If your organization already has your own guidance, your own written policy on how you deal with getting subcontractors, you can just follow the policy that your organization already has. Okay. If you don't have a policy, then you have to follow the contractor guidelines provided by CDFA.
Okay, thanks, Sarah.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, Brandon.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, so my first question is a really, really easy one. For applicant, do I put my name or the farm's name?
Yeah, you could put your name.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the one that I was most confused about is equipment versus supplies. I've got, this might sound like a trick question, but I've got $5,000, let's say, or 10,000, so be over the limit, $10,000 of epoxy wire racks that we need, but each one costs $200. So is that supplies or equipment?
That's supplies, because you're going to say it's, you know, this item times 10.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's only if you're purchasing one thing that has a value of $5,000 or more. With that, so if you're purchasing one item that costs $5,000 or more, it goes into the equipment category. If you're purchasing items that are under the value of $5,000, they go into the supplies category.
Perfect. And the other question is about stipends. So I see there's a line item for participant stipends. Are we allowed to pay, like for myself, if I go to host a workshop that teach people about mushroom cultivation, am I allowed to pay myself a stipend through a participant stipend? Is that personnel, wage, salary?
Yeah, so you would just write in the amount of time that you're using. Because you're the owner operator, you're not really a stipend receiver. You would just be writing yourself in as personnel, like your own, in that category of personnel salary.
Okay. And then there was a question in the grant about whether we are starting the project before the funding is received. Is that a disqualification for any line item? So the question is specifically about like warehouse rent. It's tough for me to find the right spot. So if I find one and it's a couple months before we can get funding, can I sign that lease, scrape together some money and start paying rent until that money is received?
Yeah, I mean, you can absolutely do that. We just can't pay the back rent. We can pay everything from the contract forward. But you can't claim expenses that happened before the contract was completed with CDFA. But absolutely, sign your lease and get going. You'll just have to cover that out of pocket until your contract begins.
Okay, and then the last question I had was if you had heard back about the social security number versus the EIN situation.
I have not. I sent it to OGA right after we got off the phone. I'm so sorry. I'll send them a reminder when we get off this call. Brandon's question was whether or not as a sole proprietorship, someone can use their social security number instead of an IEN number, like a tax ID number. So yeah, I'm sorry. I have not gotten that response yet, but I'll check in with them again.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass it on then. That's all I had.
Okay, great. Actually, Brandon, yeah, could you send me a reminder of that, like either in email or in the chat or something?
Yeah, I'll throw it in the chat.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, no problem. Okay, the next person in line, I see Judy.
Hi, thank you. So just a clarification. So the maximum, as we're identifying our communities, the maximum communities or census tracts that we can identify are limited to 3. Is that correct?
So Judy, are you asking for track number 2 or track number 1?
Oh, I'm sorry, track 2.
Yeah, okay. So, and you're asking whether or not that's the maximum number of census tracts that you can identify? Yeah, there's only 3 slots, but of course you can work with a much broader list of census tracts. You're only required to disclose 3 in the application. There's a question that asks tell us about the community that you're serving. I think it's the first question. In that question, you can discuss all of the communities that you serve, even though you did not have the slots to identify the census tracts for every single one.
Okay. Thank you. And the if we're going to have a contractor or like an existing contractor / consultant that we're already being paid for by non-grant funds as part of our project team, then do the contractor requirements of the grant have to apply to that individual if we're not using grant funds to pay them?
Not at all. The only jurisdiction that we have is over funds being spent that are CDFA funds. So if you have contractors that you're already working with and they're not a part of your budget, carry on.
Great. And one last question is, we're currently operating an urban farm, but we're getting kicked off by the property owner. So we're going to be relocating. And so, we don't want to cause confusion in the application, but we do want to show that we have a history of experience and kind of what the circumstances are. And so that wouldn't necessarily be used against us in any way. Okay.
No, I mean, that's a tragic reality, right? Of the challenges of land acquisition and urban ag, for sure. Yeah, no, that's a very understandable reality. And I'm sorry that you're in that situation. That's a pain.
Well, thank you for making this grant available.
You're welcome. Awesome. Thanks, Judy. Okay, the next person I see is Jennifer.
Okay, let me unmute can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Hi. I just have a couple quick questions. For the project team, is there a minimum number of people that need to be on the team?
No, and I'm guessing, are you talking well, there isn't for either track. So yeah.
Oh, sorry, for track number 2.
No, there's no minimum. If you are a 1-person show who wants to do workshop galore and provide seeds to whatever, that's fine. So yeah, there's no minimum requirement.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, no, we're a hydroponic farm and we have our employees each doing, their different roles of harvesting and packing and things like that. But there aren't many people that will be on the actual specific project team. So, I mean, we have our team, but anyway, okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
My next question is a simple one. The templates that you have online, for example, the SWOT template, the project work plan, and the budget. Do you have a link that we can just like download, like an Excel spreadsheet that we can just fill out?
So those links are just to provide you the basic information. All of those are built into the Amplifund application. So there's none of the links that are in the RFA are actually necessary for you to fill out. The SWOT analysis is built into Amplifund. The budget is built into Amplifund. So
I see.
yeah.
So let's say, for example, if I print it out, or when I print it out and I just handwrite what my answers are, as I'm actually typing the application in Amplifund, then I can just type it into Amplifund itself.
Yeah, the only template that's still there, yeah, thanks, Ethereal's like on top of it, is the project work plan is the only template that you do need to upload, and then you'd upload it as a Word document onto your laptop or whatever, and then you would fill it out, and then once filled, you'd save it onto your computer and then upload that into Amplifund. So aside from the project work plan, you will not need to be uploading attachments of any kind.
Okay, so in that project work plan, I'm gonna download from Amplifund.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a link. Every single piece of information that you need to complete the application is built into Amplifund. So
Okay.
you will not need to reference anything in the RFA in terms of like work plan pieces. They're all built right into the application in Amplifund.
Got it. Okay, perfect. That was it. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right. The next person I see is Mallory.
Hi again. So I have a couple of questions.
Oh, Mallory, is there any chance you could either maybe speak closer to the microphone, or we can barely hear you?
Is that better?
Not.
My phone and switch it over to that.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Do you want to take another question?
There you are.
That?
I can hear you much better.
You can hear me?
Mhm.
Okay, great. So the small business owners that I'm working with are in a priority population. They live in what's the lower income area. They are from a socially disadvantaged group, but they are looking to purchase property, but they have some very specific needs. If their property that they wind up getting is not in a if it's still in an urban area, but it's not necessarily in a low income area, will that impact their eligibility score?
So yeah, okay. So any eligible project either needs to be led by or serve a priority population.
Okay.
So it sounds like, based on your question, that it's being led by a group that would qualify.
Okay, and it won't impact the qualifying score?
No, as long as it's being led by or serves a priority population, they're eligible projects.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Question number 2.
Is there any way you can make yourself a little bit louder? Actually, you were like getting louder and then it just went back to quiet.
I think I'm up against the microphone. Let me go ahead and find that phone again.
Okay.
I didn't wind up finding it. Oh, there it is. Okay, good. Just 1 moment. I'll switch over to that.
That's great. We can hear you now.
Okay.
Yay. Mallory, I don't know if you're speaking right now, but we can't hear you at all now. Hey, Mallory, we can't hear you. So why don't I go to Aaron, and then I'll come back to you in a minute and see if maybe we can get you to come through. Okay, I'm gonna move on to Aaron because we can't hear you at all, Mallory, but we'll be here when you're ready. Okay, and Aaron, go for it, please.
Hi, Sarah. I have a question about the work plan part of the group. I'm looking at it right now. And so you have the like main project goals at the top. if you've got more than one of those, can you like combine two of them if they make sense, or is it better to keep them separate?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like the example that was provided has provided more confusion than good. I'm so sorry about that. The project work plan, please, like the goal of the project work plan is for us to understand, for an evaluator to be able to read, like, what is the extended goal of your project? You can have multiple goals if that's the case. And then essentially to in chronological order, kind of show how you're going to, what activities you're going to do that will lead to the success of your project. And these activities should relate to the costs that you're incurring in your budget. So as long as you can show like the chronology of all of the tasks, and for example, one thing I want to reiterate, like, let's say you're doing a weekly farm stand or some other thing that's a recurring activity, please make sure to include it. Like if you're in March, the farm stand happens. I know it's repetitive, but at least it shows how services are coming out and what things you are offering in your programming. So yeah, just do it in chronological order and associated to the costs that are in your budget as well.
Got it. And I guess that sort of answers my like part two of that question, where if you've got multiple like project goals happening, should you include multiple objectives underneath those? So it sounds like the answer is yes, if you've got more than one.
Yeah, absolutely. Just know that, you know, every external evaluator is looking at your project for the first time. So the more information you can provide for them to understand that you really have thought through what it is that you want to accomplish, the more convincing, you know, the easier it will be to follow sort of like your mindset and what you're working through.
Awesome. Thank you. That answers my question.
Thanks, Erin. Okay, Mallory, you're back in business here.
Yes, is that better?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Yeah, I was able to connect my phone. So the other question I have, they're looking for a purchase, and they're
Can you start your question over again, Mallory? I'm sorry, and you're cutting in and out.
Oh no.
But I think we might be able to get this. Go ahead.
Okay. They are planning on, they're applying for the down payment loan for agriculture, for ag property, and would this grant be able to supplement the down payment as well in addition to the loan?
So I'm sorry, you're asking whether or not as part of your budget for land acquisition, if part of it could go towards a down payment? Is that your question?
Yeah, I guess so. Although I think you already answered that and said yes.
So, I mean, the thing is with land purchasing is that there's so many caveats. You know, the CDFA is not going to release funds until you're in a purchasing contract.
Okay.
So that is going to be something that's extremely challenging to figure out. But by no means am I discouraging people to apply, because I really think it's important to figure this out. The reality is that the legal team is, I mean, there's a lot that goes into this. The legal team is currently trying to figure out what the guidance will be for how, like, what kind of paperwork we will accept and things like that. So, but in terms of including that in your application, that is absolutely allowable. It's just one thing to consider though is, you know, you're submitting this application in October. The likelihood of funds, the timeline is that, you know, funding will be released in spring of 2024. So there's a lot to navigate there when we're talking about land purchasing and timelines.
Okay.
Yeah.
If they went into, because the hydroponic farm that they are purchasing or equipment is in freight boxes. I'm totally losing the word right now. And will be very movable. If they rent for a while until they have that totally finished, would that impact the grant? If anything, also my other question, like piggybacking on that, is if anything changes, if anything comes up and changes the original plan, will that impact eligibility unless, I mean, they will be staying within the eligibility stuff, but like say something changes and one thing's more expensive than they expected, they need to pull funds from another part, will that be a problem?
It needs to have written approval. You need to
Written
submit
approval.
a change request form, and
Okay.
then that needs to be, you know, reviewed, and then that needs to be approved. But things change a lot in life.
Yeah.
So we do anticipate that things change. There's just a process. You can't just decide to change how you're spending your money and not have written approval from CDFA.
Okay, great. And the letters of support, is the template given the one you want us to stick to, or is that, okay, it's just an example?
It's just an example. You can use whatever format you want. One thing that I really want to emphasize is there needs to be a signature on these letters of support. It cannot
Okay.
just be, you know, because then anybody could write anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in your letters of support, just make sure that you have a signature, whether it's an
Okay.
e-signature or it's a signature that someone writes and then you scan it, or take a photograph
Okay.
on your phone and then send it over. But yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. I think that was all of them. I will jump back in the queue if I can't. Thank you. Bye.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mallory. Okay. Okay, we're Rolando.
Hey, I'm back. So is there a sample application considering how lengthy these are?
Oh, you think this is lengthy? Oh, you should look at USDA loan applications. This is a pretty short grant. No, there's no sample application because this has never happened before. So I don't have like examples of prior years. There are other grant opportunities that might be helpful that have previous applicants. So the same office that this program is in, the Office of Farm to Fork, we have another grant program called Farm to School. And Farm to School has 4 different funding tracks. One of them is for farmers. There are previous grant applications that were funded through the Farm to School track. So you could at least read funded grants that have, you know, grants that have been funded by the same office. But because this is the first time that the Urban Ag grant has been offered, there aren't any existing examples to share.
Okay, and then in the application process, is this like a black and white process where it's either you're rejected or not, or could part of your stuff be rejected and say, hey, you have a valid case here?
Yeah.
Maybe you want to expand on that.
That's a great question. So yeah, partial funding is definitely something that happens for sure. So yeah, there's definitely the option that you might receive an award letter for partial funding.
Okay, and then understanding that you can't disclose specific contact information, can you disclose the amount of applications submitted?
Not really, because I actually don't know. I would if I knew the number, but I don't know what the number is.
Fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And one thing in terms of your question though, because it sounds like your question was also a little bit like, how do I know that I'm answering the question fully or something like that? In the request for applications, which you can find on our website, you'll see like, do you want to read the RFA? The second half of that, I think that track 2 starts on page 31, is the scorecard. That is the scorecard that evaluators use to give points to your question. So review the scorecard, and for each section, when you're writing your answers in Amplifund, you can review the scorecard and say, oh, did I answer what is being scored in this question? So I do recommend that you go back and forth with the scorecard, just so you feel more confident that your answer aligns with where the points are.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Lydia?
Hi again. So if we contract with someone, say in the beginning of the first year, to do something like a workshop, and then towards the end of the second year, we want that person to do a produce something like something printed, and the two are over. Can we make 2 separate contracts for that person? Because the two might total over 5,000.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
Over the course or over the duration of the grant, you may pay the person more than 5,000, but for each session, you
different activities, you know, different activities.
Yeah. Can you send me that question, Lydia? I think I need to ask OG. I need to ask grants administration. If you, my gut feeling, just to give you some guidance, would be if you know that this contractor is going to be providing these services, like you know this as a fact, then I think Office of Grants Administration is going to say they are a contractor valued at over $5,000, and then you would follow the contract guidelines. But your question is more specific than that, so I would love to send that onward just to double check for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lydia. Next person up is Mary.
So I want to follow up to the question about the work plan.
Sure.
And you had explained that you wanted they wanted in chronological order. I kind of set mine up where I have like all my infrastructure together.
So that's fine too.
Okay. So it's not like that matters necessarily. I mean, I could redo it, but.
No, I see what you're saying, because you may have said, okay, one of my goals is infrastructure. I'm going to describe my infrastructure set. And then your next goal might be whatever it is. And you describe that set. That's also.
I have all my community engagement stuff together and supplies together.
That's totally acceptable. And I could see like mental processing, how that maybe makes more sense for certain people. So yeah, there's no strict and hard rules on how that needs to be organized. Mostly just that you're showing your work over time linked to items in your budget and your outcomes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Ethereal.
Hi, good afternoon. So I have a question about, I know you have said previously there's no matching requirement. But let's say I have like an existing sales team that is gonna support in like, well, they're gonna continue sales, but part of the program is like diversifying our sales locations. But they're already coming out of like my existing budget, like operating budget. How would I include that? Should I just include that in the work plan and like not in the budget, essentially?
The only things that you're accountable for describing are the activities that are being funded by CDFA. I mean, if you have a strong, it sounds like a marketing team, and they are a quintessential part of the success of your project, you would want to describe that as well. But in terms of needing to include anything in your budget about expenses that are not related to what you're asking for, you do not need to line item anything that you're not asking for. Is that, I'm not sure if I understood that.
I think that makes sense for me.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Brandon?
Yeah, so I just had another question about that, the work plan. So we're supposed to list the funding category, the line item for each one. Does that include both project objectives and the activities?
Okay, let me see if I understand.
So in the example, it says like infrastructure on with the measurable project objective, it says infrastructure and then describes it. And then under project activities, it repeats infrastructure and then describes it. So we're supposed to, in every single box, put the categories that are attached?
You do not need to do that. No, that was just a very, very basic example of a potential project that maybe just wanted to revamp their irrigation system, and that was it. But no, and you do not even need to orient your project goals in that way. That example has been like the worst thing ever. Sorry. Yeah, no, that is not a requirement. Yeah.
Okay, and I just want to confirm what we said earlier. We can list multiple measurable project objectives and then all the activities associated with those in the other one.
You can absolutely do that.
And then what do we need to call to what is being measured? So this equipment will let me grow specifically this many mushrooms, anything like that?
It doesn't have to be that specific. I mean, it can just, your outcome could be increased production, or whatever it is that you're ultimately trying to achieve. The metrics that you're going to collect is going to be a separate part of your reporting. So we don't expect you to be reporting outcomes in such specific measured ways, like in the work plan. It's more just like, we want to do this activity so that we can then have this outcome.
Okay, so the measurable project objective can be just as vague as just increasing yields. Because I have multiple goals obviously associated with the one, and then the second part of like we're new equipment requires new staff, and we want to incorporate a workforce development program. So should that be separately listed as a different objective? Is to develop a workforce program to support?
There's no right answer to that, Brandon, really. Like if your brain is working through this as two completely separate things, that's all I can say is it could go either way. The goal is just to be clear as to what's being accomplished with each activity and how it relates back to your goal. So if you want to separate them because it's just easier to explain the flow of activities to reach each goal, you can separate them into two separate goals. Or if it's all really coming to, you know, if at the end of the day, it's all about increasing production and workforces and hiring more workforces and activity, I can't really tell you how to write it. It's just up to you.
I see. No, that makes sense. So the goal is really to just make it clear to the reviewer what's going on and how it's linked.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. That's all I got.
Sorry,
Thank
Brandon.
you.
Okay. Thank you. I see Dr. Natasha, and then I can't read the second part. Oh, Kaluf.
Hi. So about the contractor piece, if we have contractors that are part of our team, but we're also getting bids for specific jobs on our project site, obviously we still maintain the freedom to choose at the end, correct? We don't have to go with the cheapest bid. And is there any conflict of interest with having both a team member that's also giving a contract to the job?
So you have a team member being a staffed employee that is also
yeah, I'm not sure yet, but more of like just on the board. I'm not a nonprofit, but I do have like kind of a crew of like advisors that are all deeply invested in the community that we're serving. So I haven't determined yet, because I'm still doing the bidding, whether or not they'll be paid, but they're committed to the cause. So can they not be a paid person and a paid contractor, but they could be on the team but not paid but be a paid contractor?
I'm having some challenges following you.
Okay.
I guess I would ask, actually, have you been able to read the contractor guidelines document, and was there something that was just not clear about the contractor guidelines?
Yeah, so basically the way I interpreted the contractor guidelines is they can't be paid as a team member, but I would have to get a contract from, I think it's 4 bids, it says. But then so my first question, I maintain the freedom to choose who I do the work with, or do I have to choose the cheapest bid?
Yeah, it just has to be reasonable and fair.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, if someone's charging you twice as much, that seems unreasonable, you know. So it's just, yeah, the language is in the guidance document. It says something, I don't have it in front of me, but it should say something like reasonable and fair rates of work. So that's what I think. And then
I just didn't want. I just didn't want to like us to have to be committed to choosing the cheapest bid, because as you know, plenty of people can provide cheaper bids, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the quality of work is there.
Yeah, and again, if your organization already has its own policy on securing contractors, you do not need to use CDFA's policy. But if you have your own written policy for contractors, you can follow your existing policy. You're only mandated to use the CDFA policy if you do not have a contractor acquiring policy.
And that policy could include some language that says we're committed to hiring from the community we serve, correct?
Yeah, it's your contract. We're not telling you what has to be in your contract.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, Rolando?
Just one question. Can we use this funding, like, let's say right now we're not a nonprofit, we are a for-profit business, but could we use part of this funding to make another entity? Maybe
Yeah,
not for
so-
this, but for a side venture, or that obviously involves this though.
As long as it's described in your project budget and your project work plan, then that's something that could be approved. For example, let's say a group of farmers wants to form a cooperative, and you need to cover the legal fees to file for cooperative. That's an eligible expense. So.
Okay, and then what if, following the project budget and all that, things don't always work linearly. Let's say there's a curveball, or things cost more than what you expect, or inflation, whatever it may be. What happens in those situations where it's like, oh, we're going to need maybe more money, or we're going to need more money for another thing, but we're going to need the same amount of money?
So are you asking whether you can move funding from one line item to another in order to cover unexpected raises or shifts in pricing?
Potentially, or any other hiccups or anything like that that may unfortunately happen.
You can submit a change request form while you're in contract and say like, oh, we didn't need $20,000 for this line item, but we just realized that material costs for this part of our budget are way higher, and you'd submit a change request form, and then it would go through an approval process, and that would be a possible thing. But you can't just, again, shift things and then submit invoices for things that are not in your approved budget.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, Steve, I see your hand up.
This is probably a really easy one, but we're going to include bios for our team, short bios. Do you not want us to include full resumes? Or
you can if you want. It's yeah. I mean, there's no restriction for you to not include full resume if you would like to do that.
All right. Thanks a lot. That was easy, right?
Yeah, I'm here for it. Thank you. Okay, and then I see Mallory.
Yes, hi. One more question. I think this is it. If there's anything in the application that would need to be altered, like say during the interview process, something comes up, discuss then, would we be able to alter it then, or is this firm?
So you're saying if there's a change from when you submit this application on by October 23rd, and then there's the entire period that it takes to complete an actual contract, which takes several months. So you're asking if there's a change between that during the application and then what's needed during the contracts period, if there's an opportunity for a conversation there?
Yeah, like is this would this application be like considered a rough draft that could be adjusted with the input from? No? Okay.
I mean, I would never recommend that this application be treated like a rough draft and then you're going to change it all, because that would be very problematic.
Well, yes. I meant like one or two things. Not a very rough draft might have been the wrong choice, but like say in the interview, you'd like to see a little bit more community engagement or something, because because they are. Okay, great. Thank you. That actually answers
all I can say is that, you would never be selected for an award with the expectation that you're supposed to do something that you didn't say you were going to do.
Yeah, prior to selection, I think is what I'm asking. Like if something comes up in the interview prior to selection, would we be able to amend, or would that be able to be addressed in the contract?
So I'm not sure when you're referring to interview, what phase you're talking about, because right now, like the application will close October 23rd, and then
there's no interview.
No.
Okay. I missed that.
Okay.
The other grants that I've worked with have all had interviews.
Yeah, so this grant, essentially you'll submit your application. It goes through an administrative review, which essentially just is to see if you're the right kind of entity, if you're, if you're whatever, all these little, are you in an urban area, blah, 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 all these little things, administrative review, if your eligibility is intact. If you're eligible, if you pass admin review, then it gets passed on to the technical review. And the technical review it takes about 2 or 3 months. And that's multiple people reading and scoring your full application. And then we essentially amalgamate all of those scores and then pretty much rank applications in that way. And then there's also some consideration for track 1 about geographic distribution and some considerations about, you know, distributing funding more geographically throughout the state. So yeah, there's no, the only time that there's another conversation is once you've been selected for an award, you'll be asked to then complete the contract with CDFA, and the contract involves refining your scope of work and refining your budget. And there's a process that it takes to complete a contract. But at that point, you've already been selected.
Okay, and then for track 2, is that selected entirely based on score then?
Score and geography.
Score and geography.
We wouldn't give 100% of all the grants to one location. You know, we would like to see projects funded throughout the state.
Okay. I think that that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And I know people were putting things into the chat, and I apologize for completely not looking at it because it's just a lot to manage the space and the chat. If there's anything that someone wants me to address in the chat, could you take yourself or raise your hand, and I will make sure to address that while we're still here. I know we're over time, but I'm not going anywhere if you need me, so. Okay. I guess we're done then. It's 5:08. You guys have been great. Next Thursday is our last office hours. Please feel free to email me. You can call me. My cell phone number, well, it's in my email. It's also, does anybody want it? I don't know. But just send me an email. My email is there. We can always follow up. If you didn't get your question answered, I will add it to the written Q&A, or send me an email and I will make sure to get back to you as soon as I can. So thank you all so much for your time and good luck this week. Take care. Stop recording. Oh, there we go. Stop recording. Okay.